The evening had the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like the pause before a storm. Inside her house, the walls seemed closer each day, pressing in with routine, duty, and silence. Her marriage had become a rhythm of unspoken words, where comfort replaced passion and obligation overshadowed desire. She smiled when expected, fulfilled her role flawlessly, yet deep inside, a hollow ache spread like an untended wound. She longed for a spark, something reckless, something that reminded her she was alive. That's when he appeared. Not in a grand, dramatic entrance, but in small, steady ways that chipped at her defenses. He was a colleague, someone she had brushed past a dozen times without a second glance, until one day their eyes held just a little longer than necessary. It wasn't what he said but how he said it, as though her presence mattered, as though he was tuned to a frequency only she carried. Their interactions began innocently enough. Brief exchanges, shared laughter over something trivial, passing comments that lingered long after the conversation had ended. But there was an undercurrent, subtle and undeniable. His voice, low and deliberate, made ordinary words sound weighted with meaning. And when his gaze met hers, she felt exposed, not in shame, but in recognition. Someone saw her again, not as a wife, not as a caretaker, but as a woman. The air around him carried a different energy, a quiet confidence that both unsettled and attracted her. He didn't need to declare anything outright. His presence itself was a reminder of what she was missing. She told herself it was nothing, that she was only imagining it, but she knew better. Her heart quickened in his presence, her body betraying truths her mind refused to admit. One evening, at a dinner gathering, their proximity became a silent storm. The room was filled with chatter, glasses clinking, laughter rising and falling. Yet all she could hear was the rhythm of her own breathing as she felt the nearness of him beside her. When his hand brushed against hers in the smallest of gestures, it wasn't an accident. It was a promise. A dangerous, unspoken promise that awakened something buried deep within her. She withdrew her hand quickly, her face carefully neutral, but the tremor inside her betrayed her composure. That single moment, brief and fleeting, had shifted everything. She went home that night restless, her body thrumming with a need she hadn't felt in years. She told herself it was foolishness, a passing temptation she would forget by morning. But as she lay in bed, staring into the dark, she realized the opposite was true. It was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the current between them only grew stronger. She noticed the way he positioned himself in her path, the way his words were carefully chosen yet layered with intent. Their conversations grew longer, stretching into moments that neither wanted to end. It wasn't what they said, talk of work, books, even the weather, but the way their eyes held during the pauses. There were moments when the world seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them suspended in an invisible thread. When he laughed, it pulled at her like gravity. When his voice dropped into a softer tone, she felt as though he spoke only for her. She found excuses to linger near him, inventing reasons to prolong their interactions. She told herself it was harmless, that she was still in control. Yet each day, control slipped further away. Her nights became restless. She replayed their moments in her mind, dissecting every glance, every smile, every subtle brush of his arm. In the quiet of her bedroom, she began to feel like a stranger in her own life, a woman living in two worlds. In one, she was the faithful wife, bound by duty. In the other, she was a woman awakening, pulled into a current too powerful to resist. Guilt gnawed at her. She knew she was treading dangerous ground. The risk of being seen, the risk of whispers turning into truths, it should have been enough to stop her. But the pull toward him was relentless, like a tide she could not fight. For the first time in years, she felt alive, and that aliveness outweighed everything else. The line between friendship and desire blurred further one late evening. They were alone, their conversation hushed, the space between them charged with unspoken possibility. His hand lingered near hers on the table, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. She held her breath, waiting, torn between retreat and surrender. His fingers grazed hers, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through her body. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. She pulled her hand back, breaking the contact, but the damage was done. The air around them had shifted irreversibly. They sat in silence, the moment stretching, both knowing they had crossed a boundary that could never be erased. When she returned home that night, her husband asleep and the house cloaked in darkness, she pressed a trembling hand to her chest. She felt both exhilarated and terrified, her body still humming with the ghost of his touch. She knew the path ahead was dangerous, a road paved with secrets and consequences. And yet, deep inside, she also knew she would walk it. The question was not if, but when. The night they had both been circling finally arrived, not through careful planning but through circumstance that felt almost destined. A storm had swept the city, trapping them together in a quiet apartment. The sound of rain drummed against the windows, thunder rumbling like a warning neither of them heeded. Shadows flickered across the room, painting everything in muted tones, as though the world itself conspired to hold their secret. At first, they pretended to ignore the pull. They spoke of ordinary things, work, memories, anything to fill the silence, but each word was heavy with anticipation. Her heart beat wildly, every breath shallow, her body caught between fear and longing. His eyes never left hers, and in them she saw not just desire but recognition, the mirror of her own hunger. The distance between them dissolved with a single step. His hand brushed against her cheek, tentative, as if granting her one final chance to turn away. She didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut as though surrendering to something inevitable. Their lips met, and the world unraveled. It wasn't gentle, not entirely. It was urgent, fierce, the release of weeks of restraint compressed into one moment. The kiss deepened, carrying with it the weight of everything unspoken. She felt the strength of his arms pulling her closer, the warmth of his breath mingling with hers, the dizzying sensation of giving incompletely. Her body trembled, not from fear but from the intensity of a passion she had forgotten could exist. The room seemed to blur around them. Every sense sharpened, the taste of him, the sound of rain outside, the heat spreading through her veins. Their movements became a language of desperation, a reckless claiming of something forbidden. She gasped against him, breathless, her knees weak as though the very ground beneath her was dissolving. When at last they pulled apart, it wasn't to stop but to breathe, to take in the reality of what they had done. Her body ached, her chest heaved, and her legs felt unsteady as if they no longer belonged to her. She tried to speak but no words came, only a trembling smile that quickly faltered under the weight of guilt pressing in. For a long time, they sat in silence, their hearts still racing, their skin still alive with memory. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the greater storm was the one they had unleashed. She felt consumed, by desire, by regret, by the haunting awareness that nothing would ever be the same again. And when she finally rose to leave, her steps faltered. She was breathless, unsteady, as though her body itself bore the proof of what they had shared. Morning came with a clarity that cut sharper than the storm the night before. The air was still, the sky washed pale, but within her chest a whirlwind remained. She moved through the day like a ghost, her body present but her mind elsewhere. Every sound, every glance around her home, reminded her of the life she had just jeopardized. She stood at the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she barely touched. Her reflection in the window stared back, the same face, the same woman, yet she felt transformed. She had crossed a line she once swore she never would, and now she carried the secret inside her like a weight that bent her shoulders. Her husband's voice, casual and kind, drifted from another room, and guilt struck her like a blow. He didn't know, couldn't know, the truth that had already changed everything. She smiled when he entered, but it was a fragile smile, brittle at the edges. Inside, a war raged between the passion she had tasted and the loyalty she was supposed to uphold. The lover lingered in her thoughts constantly. She remembered the way his touch had ignited her, the way his presence had awakened something long dormant. But alongside the memory came questions. What had she truly gained? What had she risked? Could she live with the secret, or would it consume her until the truth spilled out on its own? As the days stretched on, her body no longer trembled from passion but from the weight of consequence. Every time her phone buzzed, she felt her heart seize, terrified that someone would discover their secret. She avoided his eyes in public now, their connection hidden behind masks of normalcy. Yet in stolen glances, she saw the same struggle etched across his face. One evening, she stood before the mirror and asked herself the question she had been avoiding. What comes next? Could she bury this night forever, lock it away as though it had never happened? Or would the pull of that forbidden passion drag her back into his arms again? Consequences be damned? Her answer was silence. She didn't know. Perhaps she would never know. But what she did understand was this: she could never erase the memory of how he made her feel. The way he had left her breathless, trembling, unable to walk. The way he had reminded her that she was more than a role, more than a shadow moving through routine. It was both her freedom and her curse. And so she carried it, quietly, a secret pressed deep into her soul. A choice she had made, a night that would echo forever in her heart, forbidden, unforgettable, and hers alone.